All right, welcome back to the Broker's Voice. I am excited today. I have got Noel Parsons joining me. Noel is with Strategic Services Group in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Noel, welcome to the Broker's Voice.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited.
Hey, we're going to talk a fun topic today: RFPs. And so, if you are a benefit advisor listening into this one today, this is going to be one you want to take a lot of notes because you might find yourself stuck having to do an RFP. So number one, we're going to talk about why they're not the best thing, especially for independent insurance agencies, right? RFPs are typically designed for the big national houses. But two, if you have to find yourself in an RFP, how can you at least be effective with it? But before we get there, Noel, I love asking this question because most of us did not get into the insurance world by design. How did you find yourself in this beautiful world we call health insurance?
Yeah, okay. So kind of a long story. I'll keep it short and sweet. I'm actually turning 42 on Monday, and I got into this business when I was about 26 years old. And at the time I was actually, I was young and I was just still trying to figure out, what my first big kid job was going to be. And I had a friend that worked at an agency selling property and casualty, and they had just had a producer or something that left and went to a different firm. And she said, I think, you're in kind of doing sales now. And she said, I think you'd be a good fit for this. So I interviewed, and my first job in this industry, they actually hired me just to be a telemarketer in the back of the building for the producers. So I started out way back in like 2006 with a ruler and just pages of, companies' phone numbers to dial. And I would just sit there day in and day out, just going down the list and making notes and trying to set as many appointments as I could for the producers at our agency. And I did fairly well at that. And after probably, 9 months, a year, they started training me to be an actual property and casualty producer. So I was on the other side of the business. And I did that for a few years, then got into marketing. And then from marketing, I moved into the employee benefits side. And kind of with my marketing background and telemarketing and sales, back then the term business development was sort of a new term for a lot of agencies, and it was a cross between a marketing person and a sales rep. And it can mean a lot of different things at a lot of different agencies, but for us it meant my job was to go out and market our company and build relationships and meet with organizations that were a good fit for us, and then I would bring in the broker alongside of me. And from there, I still do that to this day. I love that part of my job. But from there, I kind of transitioned into, director of business development. So now at Strategic Services Group, I manage our sales force, our sales direction, and I still get out and work with young producers, recruit, train them. And I still get out and do traditional business development myself, which, many of my peers know in the industry. So I love the spot I'm in. I have fun coaching and teaching young producers and leading our sales team. But yeah, that's my job. Work all over Michigan. We're actually, you said Grand Rapids. We're actually based out of Metro Detroit, and we do have in Grand Rapids as well, Andy.
Yeah, well, you're out in Grand Rapids. I'm actually going to be in Kalamazoo in January doing a workshop, so I'll have to make sure I hit you up to grab a
Absolutely.
beer or a cup of coffee. Dare I say, because of your background, Noel, you actually love cold calling?
I'm one of the few that just don't have a problem with it. I wouldn't say that I love it, but it doesn't bother me. I've trained so many producers over the years that was such a challenging thing for them to overcome, the fear of that dial, and I always told them, hey, nothing is going to happen. Nothing's going to go wrong on that call other than the worst thing is, hey, don't call me again or something like
Well,
that.
and you got to be such an asset to SSG because now that you not only do you have a good understanding of cold calling and what it takes to be successful there, but you also have the marketing background. So, as you and I both know, you can't just cold call alone anymore these days. You got to back it up with a good marketing plan. And so, being able to do both, I think, has got to be such an asset for SSG. Let me ask you something, because your background's similar to mine. I started in property casualty. What do you see as a big difference in going out and selling property casualty versus selling employee benefits, or is there no difference at all?
That's a great question. I really think the biggest factor is managing long-term cost is more important on the employee benefit side. Um, I haven't been in the P&C industry in a while. Not sure what the cost trends are. I'm assuming, like a lot of things, they're going up as well. But it's the most important thing with your employee benefits plan. If you're going to keep it manageable for the employees and for your organization, is to have a strategy to manage that long-term cost.
Yeah, when I work with insurance agencies that offer both P&C and benefits, I tell them if you guys can find a way to create a message around, on the benefits, we often focus on the size of a claim, right?
Right.
Whereas in P&C, the area that you can probably impact the most with cost is workers' comp, which
Absolutely.
often deals with the frequency of the claim.
Great.
So if one side of the house is focused on the size, the other is focused on the frequency, you can be a very powerful agency. Now, guys listening in, if you're watching the video, you'll notice Noel has his Santa hat on today. I completely forgot to wear mine, so that's on me. But he's going to deliver some gifts today. That's why Noel's got his Santa hat. So Noel, we're going to get into the topic of discussion. RFPs. The document I think that most independent advisors hate. I think it stands for really freaking pointless. Let's talk about RFPs. Why are RFPs? Why is it so hard to win a piece of new business if you have to play the RFP game?
So, an RFP is a sales process that you're entering into, and you're really going in on the organization's terms. And there's all kinds of different RFPs, right? Some of them, like the ones that, we'll get into later, the ones that we do work on, but, some of them do allow you to keep building the relationship throughout the process. Other ones are what I call like the ice cold ones, where they put it on their website, it's public for anyone that wants to reply, and they do things like, have all the questions in by X date, and then by X date we're going to answer those questions. And all the brokers, it's public for everybody. And those are the scary ones to me, because with an RFP, you miss out on so many nuances within your healthcare plan that are important to talk through with an agent. Going back to that long-term cost, I don't see healthcare as like a 1-year cost saving game. It's a chess. It's not checkers, and it's a strategy, and it's a journey, and you've got to have the right tour guide to go on that journey. And I just think an RFP process a lot of the times removes the ability for the organization to really figure out whether the broker that they're selecting is the one that's really going to have their back long term and really going to go to bat for them, come up with creative ideas, most importantly, do the things that they say they were going to do during the RFP. And I think it's hard to flush that all out when in this industry is so full of software now. And when back in the 2006, 2007, when I got into this industry, you didn't have to be a telemedicine expert and an HRIS Ben admin expert and a wellness expert and a benchmarking expert and all these different things that are important today. And when you do one of those RFPs, everybody submits all that stuff, and you're going through that as the HR director or the C-suite. You're going through all the submissions, and it all really starts to blend together, because everybody's got the glitzy marketing material. Everybody's got all the software solutions for you. But what you're missing out on is, did you build a bridge with the right tour guide to take you on your benefits journey? Did you build that trust? Did you build that rapport with that person? And go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I can remember it was literally the last RFP I participated in. And I vowed never to do it again. It was a school district in Colorado. They were spending $30-some million a year on health insurance. And I had a pretty direct, close relationship to the woman who was running the benefits program. So I decided to participate. And I just remember the work we had to put in with it, the number of questions that were asked. And for those who are unfamiliar with an RFP, you get this document. It's filled with a list of questions from various different topics. Each list is categorized by topics, right? Scope of services, technology, capabilities, you name it. And we had to put it into this nice huge binder that looked all pretty. And then it was time to turn it in, and I had to turn it into the school district's purchasing department.
Very
And what
common.
I realized was, wait, to even get out of the first round of the RFP process, there was a board, a committee that was looking at these RFPs, and the committee was made up of people who had nothing to do with running that school district's benefits.
Right. That's, yeah. I mean, really, not to pick on municipalities, but usually their process is the most rigid and like that. And again, submitting the big binders, selecting the top three, and everybody can come in and do the PowerPoint dance when you've been selected as, one of the top three. And again, you're missing out on those important nuances. Go ahead.
No. Keep going.
I was just going to tell a quick story. This was several years ago. I luckily already had a relationship going with the organization, and they pulled that pivot on me towards the end where they're like, well, we're going to go out to RFP though. And I thought, oh shoot, we already had all the conversations. We've got your benefits program kind of blueprinted. We know where the KPIs, where you're struggling, the things we can improve, but you still want to go out to RFP. Okay. And I remember in the RFP, and self-funding had come up, and this group had grown quite a bit in size. And they had one of those questions in there of like, how would you manage the funding of their policy, and what strategies and healthcare ideas would you bring to help them manage costs? And then it had below it in like bold writing, we are not interested in self-funding. And luckily I had a relationship with them. So I actually was able to unpack that question. And it was just because years passed before you had all the software and data analytics and things you have nowadays that can help you make a better informed decision on whether your population is a good fit for self-funding or not. They had a bad deal, and they had a bunch of high claims, and they said, we'll never do that again. And that was years ago. But I convinced them to run the data, and the data actually, pointed directly at, you're a good fit for self-funding. Their population, their demographics had changed. They had a younger workforce, and ended up winning the business. They've saved hundreds of thousands of dollars. And my point of all that, my point of that story is, if they would have just went with that process and not really had any conversations, most brokers just would have saw that and just wrote it off as not a strategy they're interested in and moved on.
Take an agency like SSG. You guys are independent. I know you're part of UBA. It's where you and I first met, was at a UBA conference.
Yep.
Talk about, because there might be some advisors listening in who maybe haven't participated in an RFP before, but they will in the future. Knowing you guys are an independent agency, what makes it so tough when you think about the questions or the topics or the focus of many RFPs? What makes it so hard for an independent agency to win an RFP, in your opinion?
Well, a lot of times I actually think the outcome is predetermined. And I really think that a lot of organizations still believe bigger is better, And I always say, McDonald's makes more hamburgers than anybody else, right? But I can tell you what, I can get my grill going in the summer, and I can make you a lot better one. I just think they tend to focus on the big box names, brokers, that they submit tons of RFPs. I mean, they just pop them out. And sometimes the smaller privately owned brokers that will actually take, I think, more care with your group and pay closer attention to little details, because we're not beholden to, shareholders and boards and things like that. It allows us to get more creative. We also don't have products that we're pushing, that we're, agreements were made in the ivory tower somewhere. We kind of can move and shuffle a little quicker with our clients' needs. But to answer your question, I just think a lot of groups think bigger is better, and a lot of times that outcome of the RFP is already predetermined.
No, it's a good point because, for the people listening in, again, if you haven't seen one, often the questions are tied to how big are you? How
Yep.
many of us, the prospect, do you have?
Right.
Scope of work, resources, capabilities. And, I think a lot of the RFPs from the past were probably written by big national consulting houses, right? Because it's to their favor.
Yep.
And I do see a lot of companies, this is probably great advice for an organization who's thinking about doing an RFP. Don't just go to the internet and copy and paste. And I think you see that often too. And the final point to what you were saying is that being predetermined. Here's the punchline. I forget what the statistic is, but I thought it was like well over 70% of RFPs end up with the employer staying with the same broker.
Yeah, that's another great point. I mean, man, if you're getting an RFP invite and it's a long relationship and they're not willing to spend time with you to really unpack their issues, man, you got to be careful because you're
Well,
really
and
into a
and
trusted
again,
person.
point of piece of advice for independent agencies, the ones that aren't huge but do some great things. Be careful. I know I found out public sector was not a good fit for me because whether you're doing a good job or not, they actually have to do an RFP every 2 to 3 years. And so
Wow.
if you're going to have them as clients, you're going to constantly be playing this RFP game.
Yep.
So let's flip it, Noel. Okay, great. We've been talking about RFPs being really freaking pointless and stay away from them. But sometimes, honestly, there's a reason to participate.
Sure.
Sometimes you are still going to find yourself within an RFP. Let's talk about how that independent advisor can at least try to put himself or herself in the best position to win with an RFP. If I were that advisor, where should I start? If I'm faced with the fact I have an RFP, what can I do to at least heighten my chances of winning?
Man, I really think the best thing to do is be creative, outthink your competitors, make your submissions stand out. I talked to an HR director one time. I went in after the RFP process had completed, and she showed me a submission from one of the big houses, and it was 200 pages in this binder. And she actually just made a joke and she said, that one, boom, I don't have that kind of time. So the point there is keep your RFPs short, actually. Keep them short and sweet. Try to tell your story the most efficient way possible. Show your differentiators in an easy to read fashion. Like use lots of charts and graphs and colors and things like that, pictures, case studies. I still actually, if I'm working with the group, I provide them with a template to start to try to make their lives easier. Give them a template. We've had one crafted for years, pulled from all kinds of different RFPs, the most common questions that they ask. So I like to try to help that organization out by taking that off their plate.
Go there for a second. What if you are a broker who has a client who has to do an RFP
Yep.
where you actually might have a little control of what that RFP looks like? Because often the client will come to you for help.
Yep.
What kind of questions, again, knowing that you may not be able to compete on resources and size with some of your competitors, what kind of questions can the broker get the client to really focus on in the RFP that they think the questions that are going to matter?
I really think that pertains to the journey. What kind of support are you giving? What kind of service? What kind of team do you have behind you? You'll see all those questions. Those are very important. How many people are you going to be working with? I see a lot of times, there's a different person for every little nuance of your plan that you have to consult with. And a lot of organizations still just like that one account manager. They take care of things, come back to you with the answers. So I think those kind of things are important. What does your cost strategy over time look like? And how do you implement that? How do you routinely check up on it? Do you do a quarterly, bi-monthly, biannually, whatever that looks like? How often are you measuring those KPIs and those, kind of checkpoints that you've created throughout those 3 years to, keep the organization on the right path? How are you going to curb that upward cost trend? I think I think those are really important questions.
And
And
that's
I,
also good advice for an employer. If you are going to run an RFP, focus your questions about results. Don't use an RFP to check the box that, oh, we did an RFP. Look, actually ask the questions that say, hey, how are you going to drive results for our organization?
yeah,
And I think, honestly, Noel, RFPs, if done right, shouldn't have to be any longer than a page or two. And you get these RFPs that are 20, 30 pages deep of questions. It's like, it's overkill.
it
Just
is.
ask the most effective questions that are going to create the results your organization wants.
Yep.
And those are the questions you must focus on.
Yep. And the more questions you ask, the bigger the RFP is going to be, the return. And it's a lot of work. If you can imagine yourself as an HR director, that has decided to accept 6 to 8 RFPs, and you're busy enough trying to manage your employees and all the other problem piles that end up on your desk, but to take a time out and then have to sift through 6 to 8 50 to 100 to 150 page RFP submissions, and then come up with whether it's a good idea to change brokers based on that. It's very challenging.
Well, and I think it's, a good philosophy. I think about as an advisor when you work with a client and they want to offer a bunch of different medical plans, right? There
Yeah.
comes a point of negative returns. If you offer too many health plan options, you're creating confusion for your employees. Therefore, they're not going to be able to pick any, or they're just going to stay right where they're at.
Yep.
And when I used to, I was advising him clients, I said, do not have 3, 4 different plan options. That's too much confusion. So what employees are going to do is just pick the one they've always had. It's the
Yep.
same way with RFPs. If you find yourself involved in an RFP and there might be 5, 6, 7 other brokers involved, the larger the number of brokers involved, the larger the chance that group is going to stay with the same broker.
Absolutely. I was thinking another really important thing that's a hot topic right now with the labor shortage going on around the country. I think, 2020 was a rough year with COVID, and we're still all dealing with that. But moving into 2021, it's COVID plus this labor shortage. And one thing I think is very important that you address on an RFP is how your benefits are addressing a multi-generational workforce. A benefit to a 40-year-old that has a family and a spouse is different than something that is, a benefit plan for a 25-year-old that is still young and healthy and hasn't been to the doctor in a couple of years and doesn't really, I hate to say they don't really care, but they don't see it as much as a benefit to their employment there as an older employee. So what things are you doing with your benefits to attract a younger workforce and keep them from jumping around and staying on board as a long-term employee? And you can use employee benefits to do that. There's a lot of new programs out there that are pretty cool, that pertain to like lifestyle benefits, for example.
Well, and your message is loud and clear about, this is why as an employer, you can't go to the internet and copy and paste an old RFP. So much has changed, especially the last 2 years. And like you said, trying to build a benefits plan now when we have 4 different generations in the workforce is so difficult. So last question about RFPs before we move into a little bit about SSG. I'm going to put you on the spot. You ready?
Okay.
So if I'm an employer who is putting together an RFP, or I'm a broker who may be in the position to help my client put an RFP together, what is one question? If you could ask one question and you're that independent advisor, what would be the one question you would put on an RFP?
I really would go back to some of the things I've already said. I would ask them to lay out what does a 3-year strategy look like for you? Like I said, this is not checkers, it's chess, your healthcare costs. You can't address, chronic disease issues and things like that in 1 year. You have to have a multi-year strategy. So as a broker, what is your multi-year strategy to curb my cost trend? And what does that look like for my employees? and what does that look like for my organization as my leadership?
That's well said. That's kind of where I was going. Whenever I saw that question on RFP, I got excited because I'm like, cool. At least this is my chance to show my differentiator. I'll lay out that 3-year strategy for you to show you exactly what result we're going to create for you. The other thing I want to wrap up by saying something you said earlier is get creative. I know some advisors now who are starting to take to video to do their RFPs.
Absolutely.
So
I was
instead
going to
of turning
mention
it
that.
in as now some RFPs, as stupid as this sounds, require you to turn in a piece of paper, a bounded presentation. But if
Right.
you got some flexibility, get your butt on video and do the RFP that way. Talk about what you're going to do for them. Answer the questions via video. I think it's super effective. Super effective.
Yeah, and if not even video, just a voiceover type product, go ahead and do the submission, get them what they need. But they also always now they ask for electronic submission too. So maybe just put on your cover head, say, hey, this is my submission that you needed, the hard copies. But I've also included in my electronic version, a voiceover or a video translation of this RFP, walkthrough, review of it. And maybe
Awesome.
that's a little easier for you these days too,
Awesome.
yeah.
With the couple minutes we have left, Noel, I want to give you a chance to tell us a little bit about Strategic Services Group. I know you guys are headquartered in Detroit. You're in Grand Rapids, but
Yep.
just for the audience out there who may have never heard of the agency before, give us a little background.
Yeah. So, one of the nice things about us that we've already mentioned, we're one of the last. I mean, there's been so much M&A in our industry that Strategic Services Group is one of the last larger privately owned employee benefits brokers in the state of Michigan. And, again, that allows us to be more creative with our clients and their needs and not push products on them that maybe corporate would like us to sell our groups. We're also huge on, you'll hear all brokers say this, everybody hates quoting going to market, right? But and everyone says that because that's the science behind what we do. It's like an automatic, we're all going to do that. But what we really do is meet with you, blueprint out your employee benefits program, talk to you about, what are the challenges? What's keeping you up at night about your benefits? How do we address those? And then how do we take all that discussion and create a 3-year strategy for your organization to, improve your employee culture, to curb your cost trend, to really get your team on board. I've always said, if your employees don't understand your benefits, it can't be really perceived as a value, right? If we don't understand something, it's not very valuable. So we do a lot of employee education. We're hands-on. We're still boots on the ground in enrollment time and quarterly meetings, monthly, whatever you need. We've got a ton of technology. We've done a lot of work over the last couple of years talking with groups that are starting to get into the 100, 200, 300s that are still fully insured, and using some of our data analytics and technology to see if actually you're a good fit for self-funding now. And we've had a lot of success there. Even if they've had that boogeyman past about self-funding, things may have changed, and they probably have. So,
well, hey, I agree with you. There is a huge opportunity right now in that 100 to 500 space to do a lot of great things.
absolutely.
And
Sweet.
we need more agencies to. It's why my business exists, Noel, is to help these independent agencies stay independent, because M&A activity in this industry is off the charts, and we need agencies to stay strong. So I want to
Yeah.
thank you for jumping on the broker's voice. I think this information today was super helpful, especially for somebody who hasn't done an RFP before or has done them, but found them to be really frustrating. I
Yeah.
think you've given them some golden nuggets to help them at least make it more effective. So just again, want to thank you for your time today.
Thanks for having me on. Ho, ho, ho. Happy holidays. Take
Santa
care.
delivered today. Santa delivered the gift. So if you're listening
Yes.
in, hey, you remember, when clarity and confidence collide, massive action happens. Go make it happen today.